Okay. We are live. Whoops, what happened? Okay, so here we are. Hello, hello. Q&A. Let's do this a little bit. Okay. How is everybody doing? Wait, I need to adjust this further. Sorry. We're just logging in. You're a little bit no, this is off. Sorry, you guys. I have two cameras. I'm on YouTube Live and I'm on Instagram Live. So we're just setting up still. All right. So we're talking about meditation in practice, Q&A. You guys sent a bunch of questions. Sorry, I need to turn another light on because it's a little bit too dark.
First off, we're going to discuss posture and go a little bit over the meditation posture options.
And for that, we're going to have to move you guys and do this direction. So first of all, posture is fundamental. And obviously, I just want to mention, you can meditate in any posture, anywhere, anytime. You can meditate while you're walking, while you're riding the bus. You could just be sitting and doing something. And in the moment, you could say, you know what, I want to meditate for 5 minutes and just stay where you are and close your eyes and just drop in to the moment. So, but when we're doing formal meditation practice, like every morning, we want to do the formal posture. So I'm going to have Tom help me with the camera as I demonstrate. I think you should put it on the ground.
Cool.
So first of all, you don't have to have, look at this because it's glare. You don't have to have a special seat cushion for meditation. It's nice if you do. No. This has to be like that. Yeah. It's nice if you do, but you could just grab a pillow. And if you're using a pillow, you could just kind of bend it in half. And one mistake that I see people do when they're trying to meditate on the pillow, actually, you were right. I was wrong. Or I'm going to go a little more back. Actually, this is tricky because I'm doing the phone and the computer. I'm using two different. So if you're sitting on the pillow, you don't sit on top of the pillow because that's pointless. You sit on the pillow and then you drop down like this. So let me show this.
Roll the hips.
Yeah. So you roll the hips over, because if you're sitting on the pillow, if you're sitting on a surface, it's not really helping you do anything. You're kind of but if you move a little bit forward, what happens is it lifts your cheeks up and it automatically keeps your spine straight. And another thing is you also don't want to make a big curve here, because so you want to kind of round it a little bit. So you're sitting up straight, you round the small of your back. You're going to roll the shoulders back and down. So you want to create some space between the ears and shoulders. And another thing to point out is you kind of tuck your chin in. And by tucking your chin in, what you're doing is you're rounding this area. So by rounding this area and rounding this area, you're stretching the space between the vertebrae. So you're staying straight. And you're supported.
The way I was taught about keeping your spine straight, you kind of pretend like there was a string tied to the top of your head. If you pretend that...
Yeah, you have to sit here. You can't lie down and talk. Sorry, guys, we don't have a really good situation here, but we're going to move up.
But you pretend like there's a string tied to the top of your head pulling you taut. That's one way to think of it. And it keeps your spine kind of straight, like you were just about to lift off the ground, but you're not. Another way to think of it is your spine was a stack of coins, and you don't want them to fall over. It's just simple visualization.
Another thing, if you're doing full lotus, Tom does full lotus because he's a flexible kind of guy. mentally and physically. But if you're doing that, usually you don't need a cushion, right?
You can use one if you like, if it helps you. And sometimes I feel like it keeps me a little bit more straight.
Mm-hmm.
But
it's
you
small.
really don't.
You never really.
You don't need it when you're
Cushion is really helpful. Like I said, when you're kind of sitting, you could sit either half lotus here. I'm gonna turn this way. Either half lotus or just regular cross-legged. And apologize again for the camera. We're gonna move this back up, so we're stopping with this part of the talk. And I want to mention, I see a lot of people like forcing a lotus or full lotus. If you don't have it and you're in pain and it's like messing with you, just forget about it. The future Buddha Maitreya is portrayed as sitting on a chair.
Right.
So you could sit on a chair. The most important part is like keeping your body straight. Okay, now we're moving to a proper position here, so we could like talk like normal humans.
Another key with your posture when you sit is relaxing the muscles in your face. I find this is one of the biggest places I hold tension is in my jaw or sometimes in the forehead. Any of these things, even the neck, it could be the 8th point of Vairocana in some ways.
Well, they might not know the 8th point of Vairocana, so you have to explain it now that you brought it up.
Well,
Tom has a lot of presuppositions because he's been doing stuff for a long time. So he'll say words that you may not know what they are. So I'm gonna pause.
You can look at the handouts. Why don't you?
Yeah, but not everybody's in the Patreon group. So forget that. We have a Patreon group where we're doing meditation challenge, and we posted a handout that's called 7-point posture of Vairocana. It's just 7 points that you want to keep in mind when you're meditating.
So it's the legs, keeping the legs crossed or straight together when you're sitting. Well,
okay. I just want to move on. We don't have much time.
Yeah.
So I want to move on. I mean, we covered the posture. Oh yeah, tongue on the palate, you mentioned.
Yeah, the tongue goes against the back of the front teeth, the top teeth. This is when you have your neck tucked a little bit, the tongue almost naturally rests against the back of your front incisors. This is helpful because you don't create as much spit and you don't have to keep swallowing or get, choke or something.
Yeah, the 7-point posture, the purpose of it is basically was discovered by the master meditators who've been doing this for a long time over the course of history of humanity. This is like an old sort of, it's been passed on forever, the 7-point posture. But they recommend this because it's the place where your mind and body are like most at ease, and it helps you sink more into meditation. However, no posture is comfortable when you stay for extended period of time. So as you train in the practice of meditation and you learn to sit for longer periods of time, you will inevitably experience a great deal of pain, especially if you're in a retreat where you meditate like 8 hours a day for 10 days. You're going to be in a whole lot of pain. And it doesn't matter. Yeah, it just is what it is. And one thing with that is basically as you train your mind to really concentrate on the object of meditation, which could be the breath or the, whatever you choose to focus on during practice, as your focus becomes laser focus and you fixate on it, everything else kind of disappears. So if you have pain, if you concentrate well enough, the pain is going to dissipate because you're not going to fixate on it.
So let's move on.
Okay, let's get into let me just adjust. Can we get the stand for the iPhone? I feel like this is just not working out very well. This is our first time streaming both on YouTube and Instagram, and it's like a little bit imperfect this time, but we're about to fix it so everybody can see us well.
Well, that's better.
And we're gonna dive into questions. So you want to read out the question, Tom?
Sure. So the first question we received is
Keep going.
What time of the day is best for effective meditation?
So the time of the day that's best depends on a person. However, if you are starting and you're trying to build a practice, a routine, the best thing you could do is to have a morning routine. So you wake up and the first thing you do is do not open your phone Because the moment you open your phone, you just open up a kind of ocean of distraction and forget it. The first thing you do is maybe you make tea or coffee or whatever you need to do, and you sit down to meditate. And if you do that every single day, and that becomes your routine, and you do that before anything else comes in, work or whatever, that becomes your routine. It's the most, after so many years of like building a practice and falling off the wagon and building it again, I found this is like the most efficient way.
Yeah, for some time I preferred meditating in the evening because I had a busy day. I had a lot of things that happened in the morning, but that also leads to a chance of being tired, or your schedule might get filled. So I'm back to doing morning meditation again, and I prefer it. I think, really, you go with what works for you best, but make sure it's a routine. You do it every day.
Some people do it twice a day.
Yeah.
If you could do that. Another thing, here's a trick I'm going to give you, is when, at first we always like, oh, I want to meditate. And it's like a first time thing. And it's like, oh, I want to meditate half hour a day. This is like a very typical thing. Like same thing, like it's like, oh, I want to go to the gym. I'm going to work out an hour a day every day. If you don't have a practice that's established, that's a really long time to do it every day.
And the great masters all really recommend doing short sessions many times a day if you can. But that, really, you want to establish the routine.
So basically, you start with maybe 10 minutes, more if you can, but you should establish a bare minimum for the emergency situations. I explained this in the Patreon short video. I'm just going to go over it quickly for people who are not part of the meditation challenge. Mm-hmm. Really quick, this is a really good trick. It's a coaching trick, tricking the mind. So what happens is when you start the practice, and there are days when your ego does not like you to sit and meditate, because ego wants to do what it wants to do. So like ego, you're basically pinning yourself down, and then ego will produce all kinds of ways to get you away from the practice. So you'll feel either like ridiculously exhausted, so you might be passing out, or you feel very bored or anxious. Actually, sitting through those kinds of sessions is the most valuable thing you can do actually for the practice, because you're building the muscle. But if it happens that if you have one of those days and you're like, oh, I'm gonna skip today, do not skip it ever. Create a bare minimum and say what is the shortest amount of time that I can definitely show up for, and I can show up even if it's the end of the world. So for some people, it's just sitting down and doing 10 breaths. For other people, it's 2 minutes. For somebody else, it's 10 minutes. But the important thing is you see where you are, and, you commit to that. And then the trick here is this. The most difficult thing to do is to start. So once you commit to 2 minutes, once you sit down, 2 minutes later, you might feel like, oh, you know what? I could do a little bit more. And then you do a little more, so it's a trick. And you want to say why even 2 minutes is valuable? Because it's a routine.
Yeah, you're creating the pattern in your mind. Your circadian rhythms for your body, start to respond to those kind of things. You create the neural pathways that remind you this is the time you do this every day.
And it's a habit. You're building a habit. Mm-hmm. So at first, it doesn't matter if you're sitting 5, 10, 15 minutes. It doesn't matter. I mean, it matters in a way, but the most important thing is you're building a habit. And if the habit is every day at this time, my ass is going to sit down, that after a month of doing that, your body will just automatically want to do that. And then it's easy to add increments of time. That's the easy part.
So I think we'll move on to the next question.
Wait, there was some other...
The second part we answered it pretty much.
Okay, because this is part of the same question, but you don't know that. I know that because I saw it. Yeah, you want to read it?
So what levels of tiredness are okay, and what's a hindrance? I think we pretty much answered that, but use your own use your own discernment. If you're getting tired every single day and you're not able to focus, then maybe you need to adjust the time that you're working with your practice. If you're falling asleep, every day, it's not working. If it's occasional, then it's really important to push through and really apply the effort. And this is, again, where we said, just make sure, even if you are falling asleep, still do it. Keep the pattern.
2 minute minimum. Remember your 2 minute minimum, or whatever your minimum is. But here's the thing. So there are like a few things I wanted to throw in here. With first of all, you can't go to bed at like 3 in the morning and then wake up at 8 and be like, I'm gonna meditate. It's just not gonna work. Especially at the beginning. Later on, as you develop your concentration practice, then you could sit at any time, and you could kind of like, I find that like over time, at the beginning I couldn't do it, but now it's definitely, it's something that can develop. Like your concentration can, what's the word? Just break through anything, any obstacle. I feel that's kind of like my experience. But the valuable thing, if you join a retreat, and you do say a 10-day retreat with the group, every day you get up at the crack of dawn, or maybe before the crack of dawn, and you have to sit with the group. Nobody asks you if you're too tired or whatever. So like you'd be sitting there passing out. It's like you have to, so it's a good experience to go through that as well. Mm-hmm. But typically, as Tom said, if you don't want to get into a habit, because if every time you sit, you're like tired and you're passing out, what you're doing is you're creating an anchor that anytime you sit to meditate, that it's nappy time. So you definitely, if that's happening for you, then you definitely want to like change what time you're sitting out to meditate, and you want to identify like, why is this happening? Is it because I'm not getting enough rest? It's the wrong time to do it, or is it something else going on?
Right. So let's move on.
Yeah, let's move on.
So the next question, while meditating, do we look at the tip of the nose? Kind of cross-eye look at the tip of the nose?
Because that's often in instructions. I just want to say that's why this question came up.
The general answer is no, not really. And personally, I've tried that, and it gives me a headache right away. The general advice is that you're either looking at a point a couple feet in front of you on the floor, or in Mahamudra, that you're staring straight ahead with wide eyes. You can meditate with your eyes closed, and that's helpful for some people. It's really, it makes it easy to fall asleep though. So that's something to experiment with a little bit. But really the point, and I think Lana can talk a little bit about this, is what you're trying to do is disconnect from that sense input. You're just like keeping your body straight and focused and not moving. You want the eyes to stay focused and not moving, so they're not creating new distractions.
One thing I want to say about this is if you close your eyes and then you like crack them open, kind of like, like when you're waking up in the morning and you're like, okay, when you're like cracking them just open and you let a little sliver of light in, there is like a natural place where your eyeballs are kind of pointing. That's like one way to think about it. For me, I wear contacts, and sometimes like keeping eyes somewhat open messes with my eyes. They get like all, so it's really again, you have to find what works for you. Sometimes like if I'm tired, I'll meditate like this, like I'll just look ahead. And the benefit of, because that's also one of the instructions, there are many different ways. Mm-hmm. So one of the instructions is like Bodhidharma in Zen Buddhism, he would meditate by facing a wall. So a lot of Zen Buddhists will like stare into the wall, blank wall. Some people stare into the sky, so it's just like emptiness, right? And it's just expanse. But the benefit of keeping the eyes open for me, and I do that sometimes, is in addition to using that method when you're like tired and kind of passing out, another benefit is you learn, you can keep your eyes open, but your focus is still whatever it is you determined. Let's say breath. So you're focusing on the breath or on the breathing body or on the sound, whatever it is, right? And then what happens is like you stop fixating on the object of sight. So and it's really interesting. It's like you can have your eyes open and kind of see in front of you, but your seeing is entirely inside of yourself. It's an interesting experience to have. Like it's an interesting flavor that happens. And in this way, you're learning to kind of disengage from the senses, which right now we're very tied to the senses. In this way, you can like collect your all of your awareness inside of yourself on the object. Anyway.
So maybe we'll move on.
Yeah.
This is a great question. Somebody said that they have 12 years of practice and asked, how do you track your practice?
Progress.
Sometimes your progress, right? Sometimes it feels like you're actually regressing. So I think you can.
Well, I was gonna say this is so common for everybody. I had this, Tom had this, and everybody I've ever known who meditated had this experience. And actually, meditation teachers always talk about this. At the beginning, so at the bare beginner level, let's say you sit down, you never meditated before. The first thing that happens is like you realize you can't stay focused. Like you can't, if you say like, oh, I'm gonna watch my breath, within like 2 seconds, your mind is like, psh. And like sometimes it could be 5 minutes later and you're not realizing, that you were distracted.
You're making lists of something.
Yeah. And I've had people say like, oh, I can't meditate. I tried. And it's like, okay, it's kind of like me saying, oh, I tried to play the piano. I put my hands on the piano for the first time, but I couldn't pull off Moonlight Sonata. So I just, I realized it's not for me. It's like silly, right, to say that. So meditation takes practice. Mind is a wild horse. And I always say, like, when you realize how little concentration and presence and focus we have, it's a miracle that we are able to get anything done at all in our daily life. So that's the first thing. So you want to get over that first moment of like, oh, I'm a disaster. You're not a disaster. All human race is a disaster.
Yeah, you're just becoming aware of how busy your mind actually is, that it seems like it's getting louder even.
Yeah, so it's actually not that you're getting worse. Okay, so then the next level is like, you might get moments where you're getting a hang of it. Sometimes your mind is like a glue sticking to the object, and then sometimes it's a complete disaster and it's like you can't tame it. And then there is that experience that, Tom mentioned, is like over time you start to feel like, oh my God, I'm getting worse. You're not. It's just that you've always been like that. Is now you're becoming aware of how untamed your mind is, and everybody has this. So just keep going. And the big thing is like people will see that, they'll get discouraged and they'll stop meditating. But the most important part is I'm gonna get to that in a sec. The most important part is to remember that when your mind is least willing, that's where you want to really rein it in and keep trying. Even if you keep losing it, you just keep coming back. Don't give up, right? That's I always think about, like, it's like when you go to the gym, you lift the weight, the uncomfortable moment of like lifting the weight and the repetition of that's the part that's making your muscle develop. In the same way, every time you lose the object and you remember to bring it back and you bring it back and you try to hold it, your attention, that's that muscle getting stronger. There were other. Did you want to say anything? Sorry, I'm like.
A couple points about keeping progress. There's a number of different things that you can do. One thing that's really great, and this is common to most spiritual traditions, keep a journal. Keep notes for yourself on how you're doing. This gives you the chance to look back and reflect and see patterns that you might not notice directly. Another thing is that when you're tying the mind to your object, look how long are you actually staying with it. If you find that you're staying longer and longer, that's one way to chart some progress. But I think the favorite advice, and I'll let you do this one.
So I had real quick, when you sit in meditation, you get different phenomena happen to you that are very unusual, and sometimes you can taste states that are like, wow, and then of course the ego immediately is like, I'm a master, like, or it's like we get attached and then we're like, I have to go back and do this again, and then you like spend time trying to recreate and it won't come. And I had things like that happen, obviously. And then I went to the master Yangtze Rinpoche, who's like a respected meditation master and one of Tom's main teachers. And I tried to tell him, I was like, oh, is this experience that I had, like, was that what I think it was? And he wouldn't even entertain that question, because his point is like, can you take your practice from the cushion into your daily life? And the thing is, like, of course, like, in the event of samadhi, you're not going to bring samadhi into your everyday life, because samadhi is like union of object and subject. That's like but this kind of awareness of kind of the place of being present with yourself, of not constantly reacting to little triggers, and just kind of like, keeping that tranquility and peace all throughout, and keeping mindfulness all throughout the day. That's the key. And another thing I want to mention, which is really big, and they bring it up a lot in like Buddhist communities, but I don't see people bringing it up very much. However, when I read Christian mystics, they all talk about this too. Not just Christian mystics, other traditions too, mystics in general. And that is union of merit and wisdom. And what does this mean is that in order to make any kind of progress, so like, you could train your concentration and you could be like a good meditator. But if you're kind of a jerky person, and if you're like really very judgmental and very kind of difficult person, and very reactive and criticizing others too much and unkind, that is an obstacle. And it sounds a little bit like a, what's the word? Like it just sounds like something people say, like a cliche, but it's not a cliche. There is a very psychological reason why this is so. When we are kind of, when our inner asshole comes up, that's the ego, right? So the small ego that's like insecure, and when the small ego pokes its ugly head up, we experience, we go between arrogance and low self-esteem. And actually, if you think about it, like arrogance, let's for a second pause, compare arrogance and confidence. So these two things are like how we feel good about ourselves. The difference is that when you feel confident in and of yourself. You feel good about your own capacity. You have a healthy sense of self. When we feel arrogant, there necessarily has to be another person for us to compare to, so that we can like feel superior. And that's the arrogance. It's like, I'm better than you. I'm like, well, all this. And that's the unstable. And when we feel arrogant, that's in response to insecurity. Now that insecurity is hidden. We don't realize it. But that's automatically, when you need to compare to somebody else, that's an impulse. That's an answer to some hidden insecurity.
Right. It's coming at someone else's expense, basically.
Right. And then low self-esteem basically is like, it's like the same thing. It's just on a good day, the person is arrogant. On a bad day, there is like low self-esteem. It's like a yo-yo. It's living in duality. So the reason I'm saying that is because these states of like not being kind, not having understanding for others, all of this kind of stuff, they're based in small ego. So they are necessarily like based in delusion, and they're based on like reaction of the small ego. It's our animal, instinctual, self-protective self. For as long as we indulge in those things, we strengthen the voices of small ego. And this is, when you make those voices strong, then the voice of your higher self cannot come through. And in meditation, we're trying to like settle the ego chatter. But if you're like sit in meditation, and then as soon as you get off the cushion, you're like, well, this fucking person, and you're like, it's just, there is no progress. And I mean, we all do this. It's like, it's just, we need to become aware of it, and we have to like, that's why spiritual practice, you can't just do meditation. You have to understand basic psychology.
Study, yeah. You
have to practice compassion. I mean, Buddhists have methods to actually develop kindness. It sounds so basic, but it's like, it's a muscle like anything else. So like, the more you do something, the more you're likely to do it. And at first it's very artificial. It's like, oh, I'm training to have altruism and compassion. But then you hammer it in so much, you're like familiarizing your mind with thinking in that way until it becomes automatic. That's how masters are created, because all masters, doesn't matter what tradition, they all talk about love, forgiveness, compassion. That's how inner peace is built, because you're not triggered by like somebody who aggravates you. You have compassion, so you're just always like, somebody makes mistake,
you got to develop the toolkit,
Yeah. Anyway.
So maybe next question, we're getting close on time, but I think maybe we can go a little over. The next question is it difficult to exit meditation and come back to reality? So I think we talked about this a little bit ourselves. I think for the most part, no.
Definitely not. It's hard to enter meditation. You want to tell them, so there people, what we call meditation, it's like, oh, I'm sitting to meditate. It's not meditation. In Tibetan Buddhism, for example, like word meditation means you're sitting, you have to have capacity to keep a mind on an object. If you don't have that capacity, you're not meditating, technically. So what we're doing every day when we sit down is like we are learning to meditate.
That's absolutely right. We're training in the skills that will lead us to a powerful meditation. And, in the two techniques of tranquility, fixed meditation, and analytical meditation, the analysis and really thinking deeply about things in your life, it requires being able to sit still and hold that train of thought one-pointedly. So, I think to answer this question, when you have been meditating successfully or training in meditation successfully, coming back to the normal world, it's usually a very peaceful kind of calm that you bring into your daily life, hopefully. So if you're getting stuck and you have a hard time returning to reality, then it kind of points to maybe that there's other things going on.
I want to point something out. So you're saying that because that's in the question, coming back to reality, but there is an inherent problem with that wording. This is my NLP background popping in.
You're not going away.
Yeah, I want to say this out loud. So is it difficult to exit meditation and come back to reality? There is a presupposition here that you somehow exit reality when you meditate. It's like, no, you're more in reality when you meditate. In our daily life, we're not here. I'm thinking about the past or the future. What I got to do? Who I have to see? It's like, we're never really here. So meditation is about like, the voice can keep going while you're focusing, but the voice becomes this kind of like blah, 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 like it gets more silent because now you're fixating on what's happening inside. Like I'm
be
breathing.
Here now.
Yeah, you can feel. I gotta mention, I have a friend who had breast cancer, right? And before she found out about it, she was in retreat, in one of those like 10-day retreats. And while she was sitting, she felt, because body and mind are super connected, and we have capacity to cognize everything about our body mind simply by going inside, and it takes training to do that. But she, just by like focusing and on the body mind and being in the present moment, she suddenly became aware of something that's there all the time, but she didn't notice it before. She became aware of this like weird heating sensation in her breast. And like anyway, so long story short, it turned out she had breast cancer. But and another thing, like when you sit down to meditate, you can start to develop phenomena where you can feel your heartbeat. Like you feel like from inside. You can sometimes hear it inside of your head. Like these are things that are happening full time. We're just not here to be aware, to kind of, So we rather, when we come back out of meditation, we exit reality and we get into samsaric fabricated reality.
And another point, just real quick, there's a lot of talk, we mentioned it in the last question, but there's a lot of talk about the post-meditative experience. And what you're hopefully doing is establishing a calm, a tranquility, an even one-pointedness, and able to bring that with you off the cushion into your daily life. So I think that's another kind of way that you're eventually, hopefully, bringing more and more of your experience from the session out into the way you behave, with the mundane, let's call it that.
So the person who sent us a bunch of questions, that were excellent questions, also said, I found that meditation in morning sometimes puts me in freeze mode and I feel super sluggish. That's interesting. Freeze mode, that's part of your, like, that's our irrational automatic consciousness. And that's interesting. We could talk about this privately if you want more, but that's interesting. I mean, sluggish, that's normal. The question is like, did you get enough sleep? Like, you typically, as you get into wholesome practices of meditation, and like you start to focus on your well-being, you want to get 2 hours of sleep before midnight. So you want to get to bed by, like, ideally that's like a circadian rhythm, right? If you're sluggish, you didn't get enough rest, and best rest is, when you're sleeping before midnight. That's number one. Number two, it could be you're not a morning person. People are different. So, you can pick another day, part of the day, ideally the exact time every day. It could be after work, after you unwind, or I don't know, like, so just, and then stick to that,
Be
but
scientific,
it's like, exactly. I was going to say, your body mind is your laboratory and you're a scientist. Yeah. So, okay. You want to read another? I'm just making sure.
One more good
One more
question. Are we supposed to reach samadhi every time we meditate?
Let's define samadhi first. No, let's go back. Let's look at the wording. Are we supposed to reach blah, blah, blah every time we meditate? We're not supposed to do anything. Actually, it's a little tricky because on one hand, of course, meditation has a kind of a purpose. However, part of it's like a little bit tricky. It's a paradoxical. Part of sitting in meditation is like, you're not trying to do anything but just be.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to be, you have to like stop all of this. And you're basically just familiarizing yourself on a very deep level with your body-mind continuum, right? And then when you do that, what happens is like things come up, certain feelings, and then your ego is like, no, I don't want this, or there's like all this push and pull going on. So like we're trying to not do any of that stuff that we normally do. So that's like one thing.
The Zen and Chan traditions have a lot of really great aphorisms talking about just sit,
Or like as Dharma Mitra also says, do because it has to be done. You don't do it because of this and that. You don't, like expectation. And that goes back to that thing. Like once you have some kind of experience in meditation, that's like, wow, then you're like, you want to recreate that. And then like, that's like means to, you turn it then into like means to an end. It's like lust for result. If you have lust for result, you shot yourself in the foot. So it's a little bit tricky. These things come over time, right? Like you have to kind of wrestle with things. Like at first but anyway, it's a little bit hard to talk in one-dimensionally because things are very relative. And at different points of practice, at one point you might need to dangle a carrot in front of you to make yourself sit, So anyway, and then samadhi. What is samadhi? Samadhi is union of subject and object. What is subject and object? Subject is you, the perceiver, and object is that which you're perceiving. Mm-hmm. When those two things become one, you can talk about samadhi intellectually and break it down, but you can't really understand it intellectually because it's an irrational thing. You have to experience it. So what happens is like, if I focus on the sound as the object of meditation, and then I fixate on it so hard, my concentration on sound becomes so intense and so single-pointed that all of my other senses start to collapse into the sound, and then you disappear. But you don't know you disappeared until you come back. When you come back, you're like, holy cow, I was sound itself, but that when you're in there, you don't.
And I remember when I first practiced meditation, I was trying to just be silent. And the moment I get silent, then I'd be like, oh, wow, I'm silent. And then realize I'm talking again.
Yeah, that happens. That happens too. And that's why, and then over time, we learn to hear. Again, it's the voice that's like super attached. That's the voice of the small ego. Small ego always wants to be rewarded. It always wants to feel important. It always wants to feel like number one. It's just like, it's not really who you are. It's just like, it's like a animal instinct that's always rushing for food. I'm number one. But we could disengage from that, and eventually, like, that voice starts to get silenced, or the volume gets turned down,
Yeah.
and then the volume of the higher self goes way up.
I think meditation, what you find is that it creates a space where the different pieces of your mind arise, and you don't have to identify with them.
Yeah, you don't over-identify with this life.
You can see, oh, I'm getting angry about this, and decide I'm not going to run with that thought. I'm not going to entertain that energy. This, that's what creating the space in your mind, really, it has so many benefits.
Also, you realize that, like, it's not me who's angry. Like, there is anger passing through, but that's not me. And that's the thing, like, meditation is also about, well, here's one thing we kind of talked about wanting to mention. I'm going to bring it in fast, and then we're going to quickly come out. The part about, God, I'm losing my train of thought. Okay, so, shit, I lost my train of thought.
Identifying with.
No.
Oh, okay.
Meditation. Wait. Give me 1 second. I can't.
We'll save it for next time.
Oh my God! And it was like an important point. Say something else, and then I'll see if it comes. See delusions and. Oh yeah, this is it. We have it in our notes. Okay, this is one thing. It's about shamatha vipassana.
Mm-hmm. Tranquility and analysis.
Meditation training consists of two things. First thing is taming the mind. So, first, mind is like say what we said. It's like, yeah, we meditate on a daily basis, but we meditate on problems. So, like, we're so good when we sort of get irritated by somebody, or somebody insults us, or like Donald Trump is a really good or like any of the politicians, if we don't like somebody, we get so good at like meditating on that person and on our negative feelings. The difference is that that's basically where your mind goes automatically, the small ego, and fixates on it. It has a capacity to hold the object really well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we know how to meditate, but the problem is, like, that's the automatic pool. What we want to do is we want to focus where we want to go, but mind doesn't want to do that. Ego doesn't want to do that. So we have to so that's the first level, is developing concentration. Second level, then, when you develop single pointed concentration, then you take that to analyze who am I? What is reality, right? And then you start to like penetrate this kind of veil and like this self-concept, and you deconstruct it. And then basically the end result of that, because it's like people think like, oh, I just have to sit here and space out and I'm going to become enlightened. No, you develop the capacity of the mind so that you can take that wisdom and break through Maya delusions. And Maya is about, seeing things in a way that, like, the way we see reality is not how reality actually exists. So, we're kind of like wrapped up in projections. So what happens in this second part of analytical meditation is like you start to pierce through Maya.
Mm-hmm.
And once you like pierce all the way through, that's basically like liberation. You realize these mistaken concepts that you've been in, and you break through them. Okay.
All right. I think that kind of wraps it up for today.
All right. Thank you, guys. We're going to save this and post the recording and post the link.
And we'll be doing more Q&A sessions again. So if you've got anything that rises, jot it down, send it to us, and we'll talk with you in the near future.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Bye. Okay, we have to close this first. And now. And sorry. And how do I end this? Where's the?
And,
Oh.